It's a great pleasure to welcome Kai Eide, Norwegian diplomat, international envoy to the Kennedy School. Kai, I wanted to talk about Afghanistan, and I want to talk about diplomacy as well. You're a former United Nations envoy to Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
You served there between 2008 and 2010.
Mm-hmm.
That was an extraordinarily difficult international
yes.
mission. Difficult war to prosecute, difficult for the international community to provide humanitarian assistance, to provide the political mediation among the various factions in Afghanistan. What were your greatest challenges as you look back on that mission?
I don't know if I can say that there was one biggest challenge. Certainly we had been given a very ambitious mandate by the Security Council, and the UN mission was of course staffed in a way that was inadequate in order to fulfill that mandate. But to try to bring the international community together in one strategy on the civilian side, and also to bring the civilian and military together, those were of course very ambitious tasks.
Right. And of course, I think it was clear to most observers what the central military mission was, to try to, if not defeat the Taliban, at least push the Taliban back, to give some space for the Afghan government to strengthen. As you worked through these options with the other officials, what was the primary mission of the UN? Was it humanitarian economic assistance? Was it just to help strengthen the capacity of the Afghan government? Was it political negotiations or a political process that might resolve some of the problems in the country? What was?
I think the main challenge and the main problem during my period was of a political nature, and that was to help steer the country through a presidential election that was extremely complex. First, to be able to be the interlocutor of the international community vis-à-vis the Afghan institutions and the president, and also to try to reflect the views of the Afghan authorities vis-à-vis the international community. It was a two-way street, really. It's not only representing the international community, but also trying to interpret the Afghan leadership vis-à-vis the international community. That is quite an important part of it.
Mm-hmm. And obviously you faced a number of difficulties in organizing that election, but the election was held, the Afghan government got through it. Did you see, from the beginning of your time there to the end of your time, could you say you saw growth in the maturation of democracy and even political stability in Afghanistan, or was it the reverse?
I think probably the reverse.
Mm-hmm.
The elections, of course, were very difficult. There was a significant amount of fraud. There was foreign interference. There were both. But I must say I believe that we got through those elections in a way that was satisfactory in light of the constitutions and the rules that had been established for the elections. So in that way, in that sense, I was very pleased. But of course the result was that President Karzai, in my view, became more dependent on a group of old warlords and power brokers that I had hoped would belong to the past of Afghan policy, and that they would not contaminate the future of Afghanistan's development.
Right. It's long been considered important in international politics that in a difficult venture such as this, there be, if not a union, at least a good working relationship between military forces and civilian forces. Now, this was very difficult in a war zone, especially a war that had gone on for so long. How did you relate to the NATO military leadership? And were you synchronizing international political efforts with the military, or were you separate in every way?
And certainly I saw Commander ISAF every Thursday if I could. He participated also in meetings. I had a small group of ambassadors. He was always there. He listened to our political discussions. So in that sense, we were close. We knew what the other was doing. But of course, the wider problem is how does the civilian international community relate to the military? While on the military side, and I must say many leading politicians, there was an expectation of a close relationship between military and civilian, a comprehensive approach, so to speak, to the conflict. Among NGOs and civilian agencies, there was an expectation of the opposite, that we managed to keep a distance from the military. So that balance between what the military saw as being the right way to go and the civilians, that was very difficult. I had to see to it that there was a good relationship, but also had to maintain a certain distance.
Understood. We are in the United States approaching the 10th anniversary of 9/11 this coming September. And therefore the 10th anniversary of the UK-US military intervention in Afghanistan against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda in October 2001, nearly 10 years, that there have been international military forces on the ground. Do you see an end to the war? Or do you think that the war is going to continue for a number of years? Is there a political solution looking ahead? Or will we continue to see essentially a civil war evolve with the presence of these extraordinary number of international troops? What's the future?
I think we have to realize, and I think most are now, that we're not going to win this war. But I believe that nor is the Taliban going to win the war. We can go on fighting for years to come with heavy sacrifices in the international community, among those who send troops and also among Afghans. And I don't see really why we should do that. I believe that we should all recognize that there is, in this conflict, as in so many others, a need for a political solution. So let's try to engage the insurgency, the Taliban in particular, in a dialogue. Is there a readiness? I believe so. Of course I cannot be certain, but the only way of finding out is to try to sound the Taliban out, sound the insurgency out, if there is a way out in a political sense and not on the battlefield.
Right. You've spoken publicly about lessons learned in Afghanistan, based on your experience there and based on your experience as a diplomat over many decades. Are there some fundamental lessons about the international experience in Afghanistan that we should all be looking at right now?
Let me mention one fundamental lesson, and that applies to any conflict, and that is if you are in a foreign country, and a country you don't know, listen to the people who live there. Listen to the Afghans. Take their advice when it comes to shaping strategies. Try to understand their society. Where do they come from? How does religion, for instance, impact on the way they think and on their society? I think we've not done that to the extent that I believe is required, and we've paid the price for it, unfortunately.
So you think that, in essence, there hasn't been as much consultation with the Afghan authorities, or even the Afghan people, over the general direction of international strategy?
Absolutely, there has not been. I have seen how in important Western capitals we have spent a lot of time shaping strategies, making decisions of great importance without involving the Afghans and the Afghan leadership. And the Afghans feel humiliated by that kind of behavior from us. We are talking about a strategic partnership, but the strategic partnership can only be shaped if there is a full involvement of those who actually own the country, the Afghans. And I'm afraid there we have failed to a large extent.
This is perhaps a surprising question, given the ferocity of this war over 10 years. But are you hopeful? You know, given what you know, your experience there, all the trials, both at NATO and at the UN, and you served for a long time in Afghanistan, is there hope for the future of the country? Can the government stabilize itself? Can the Afghan people rise above war? Can there be peace?
I think we've seen a weakened government over the last year or two. A government that has been steadily weakened, unfortunately. I think we're part of the explanation for that. We have continued criticizing the government and criticizing President Karzai constantly without trying to understand him. We need President Karzai. He is the president of the country in a critical period. Yes, there is hope if we can see to it, if we can help seeing to it that there is a stable government. It will be hard. And there is hope if we can all realize that there is a political path that has to be tried out, and that this is not going to be solved by military means.
Kai Eide, thank you very much. Thanks for being at Harvard, and thanks for this interview.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Burns.
Thank you.